Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending where you are on this turbulent, fast-forward planet. For the vast majority of humanity, today is just another day. For millions of people in zones at risk from earthquake, flooding, heat, drought, that's not the case. Not to mention war. Today, I was supposed to have Irwin Redlener from Columbia University's National Center for Disaster Preparedness on the show from Lviv in Ukraine, where he and others are building a program to foster the capacity to teach in disaster, to teach in dislocation. It's an education program that I wrote about and had Irwin on the show to discuss last year. But he couldn't be on because they are in a shelter, just like these kids are in a shelter. Vladimir Putin unleashed another round of rockets. The warnings are almost across the entire nation through the course of today. Redlener and his team have been underground, just like these students underground. This is, I believe he's one of the, he is an advisor to the Minister of International Affairs of Ukraine. And he posted this picture by Olga Morozova earlier today. You can see so much in this picture. There's a normalization of calamity. Kids trying desperately to be kids, to be learning, teachers trying desperately to teach, even in complete and utter disruption of daily life. When I had Irwin on here last year, just before the school year, again, there's tons of work just to be done to manage the capacity of teachers to deal with emotional disarray in classrooms of kids who have been moved around Ukraine from the east to other zones or to Poland, where there's language challenges as well. But Irwin can't come on. I also reached out to Kit Miyamoto, who I think may be able to come on. He's one of the world's leading earthquake engineers, structural engineers. He just arrived in Adana, Turkey, right in the middle of the earthquake zone. And Kit has someone I've been relying on for many years to walk through not only the damage from earthquakes, but the what you see in the wreckage. That's a possibility, gives a possibility of better times ahead. As I wrote the other day on my newsletter, Sustain What, drawing on the wisdom of many earthquake engineers, it's mostly buildings that kill people, not the shaking. The shaking destroys the building. And there's so many instances and examples where buildings don't have to fall down, even in a 7.8 major earthquake. If a building is structurally designed to be a unit, to move with the waves of energy, as opposed to becoming several different units that are moving asynchronously, that's the kind of shaking that can take a building down. Anyway, Kit Miyamoto has just arrived in the earthquake zone. He does this. He was in Haiti after each earthquake there. I first interviewed him in Nepal when he was there in 2015. So we're going to wait a few minutes to see if he can join us. Again, the show is about children, mainly the fate of children in zones of disrupted life, whether it's a shock like the war in Ukraine, where it's an intentional catastrophe, or a shock like the earthquake, two earthquakes, plus area. Sorry, if I blink out briefly, it's because I'm on Starlink, the wonderful but limited satellite network for those of us who are not on a hardwire to get on the internet. Actually, it's a tool that's invaluable in disaster zones. And we were also going to talk about Somalia, which is a looming. Right now, there are kids dying so needlessly through confluence of conflict and a fifth year of relentless drought in an area that the agencies have determined this is like this hasn't happened before in the modern era, having this length of droughts, and it appears to be linked to a particularly enduring La Nina, the cold Pacific, disrupting all kinds of things around the world climatically. So I'm Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School. Again, the show is a little bit in disarray. Just in case you haven't heard of Irwin Redlener, for 50 years, he has done scholarship and policy advocacy around making lives less bad for kids who are either in chronic situations of stress, poverty, deep poverty, or are facing complete disruption of life through the dislocation and trauma that comes through a disaster. He and colleagues this is quite a while ago, but this paper still stands out. Children and Mega Disasters, Lessons Learned in the New Millennium. And you can Google for it. It's an open access paper that talks about much of the work that's been underway ever since by him and others to try to foster resilience, to limit the long shadow of impacts that can come through the dislocations and physical harm and trauma of things like hunger, but also the stresses of continuing conflict on family, the quality of family life and the like. Again, he couldn't come join us today because he's in a shelter, just like these kids in Ukraine are in a shelter, and trying to live a normal life is in a zone of complete disarray. There's a question here from Sonia Betts. Does anyone know if there is an organization in Ukraine that is accepting children's clothing donations? Sonia, I'll work on that. If you go to revkin.substack.com, leave a comment as a question there. I'll look that up for you. I've listed other places to support in Ukraine in the past. Here's the post. So if anyone wants to find out more about what to do to help kids there with clothing and the like, let me scroll down because I did this post last year, how you can help as Ukraine's traumatized children face the back to school season. That was last September, August. And this picture also shows you so much. Kids want to be kids. They want to exercise and run. They want to play. It wrenches me when I look at these photos of the kids on the right. When I grew up in Rhode Island in suburban splendor, I would walk off into the woods or into a construction area and just hang out. And here they're trying to do the same thing in a very abnormal situation. And there are things that we can all do to help their organizations. So if you go to that post, just go on revkin.substack.com and plug in Ukraine. If that's your interest, you'll find some links to places to support. And that was Sonia Betts had asked a question. Do you know if there's an organization in Ukraine that accepts children's clothing? I'll find out. So post a query so I can remember, and I'll see what I can do. The same goes for the earthquake, because we'll go to the post that I did about the earthquake as well. Earthquakes. This was a couple of days ago. I've updated this post since, and I led off here with a Global Citizen has a fine list of organizations that you can contribute to help with various dimensions of the crisis that's unfolding there. So Global Citizen, again, is among many places that have posted suggestions on how to support those who are dealing with the unfolding trauma in Turkey as well. That's that post. If you have other questions, post them here. And I'm going to wait a few more minutes just to see if my longtime source, Kit Miyamoto, can come on. Maybe in the meantime, I'll play an interview I did with him from the disaster zone in Nepal. I caught him there by Skype in the early. This was. Yeah, let me just play this. It's worthwhile because these patterns repeat. So hold on a second. Whoops. Hold on a second. And I'll play that interview from a very different country facing a very similar calamity to the one that's playing out in Ukraine. Hold on a second, and I'll get this in the right place. Hold on. Thank you for tuning in despite the disruption here because of, they said, the continual alarms, the rocket warnings in Ukraine today sort of upended our plan for the show today. But I'm here to answer your questions and offer some thoughts and related to various unfolding calamities. And let me just go back to the videotape. Chrome tab. I love this. So Kit Miyamoto has been a source of mine on the earthquake beat for a long time. And I'm sad that there is an earthquake beat. There's so many aspects of the destruction that unfolds after these events that are not necessary. So this was back in 7 years ago, 2015, when Kathmandu suffered the impacts of a pretty significant, but not worst case earthquake. Hold on a second. We'll get there. Hold on. One more second.
Out, and we want to fly in. So there's obviously natural traffic jam, and it was kind of touch and go. I was talking to the lady next to me. She was from BBC, and it was her third try the last 2 days to get into the country. So, wow. But I'm here, and today I spent a day in Kathmandu itself and assess damage and see the scenery.
So, what's your impression of what fell down and what didn't?
Well, it's very interesting. The many tall buildings, even the modern structures, had quite a bit of damage actually, and also the large temples, large one, big ones. They had a lot. And I think part of it is epicenter was almost 80 kilometers away. It's almost 50 miles out. So it's definitely a far distance earthquake. And this kind of reminded me of Chengdu. The Chengdu in 2008 was kind of like that. The Sichuan earthquake, it was magnitude 8. And Chengdu city itself, damage was somewhat limited because actually epicenter was almost 60 miles away. So very kind of similar kind of things going on. But because of the far distance earthquake tend to have tend to affect the taller, so-called longer period of buildings tend to. So that's why I think that most of the damage concentrate in buildings with a high period, which means taller or bigger buildings.
So the limited losses within Kathmandu are likely a function of the fact that the power was dissipated there substantially.
I think so. For the most of the period, most of the frequency range seems to be much attenuated, quite good. But also I think construction is, I think it's okay. I mean, I went through some of the smaller construction sites, and I get to see the concrete, frames with a good ductile details that has the 135-degree roofs, tight spacings. And I know they use the Indian building code, and the Indian building code is, maybe it's not quite good as IBC, but they're actually decent, So they have, I think, decent practice. So, but also obviously the older non-ductile concrete structures, same old story. They're really dangerous. There's a lot of collapse because of many people died.
Right.
And I mean, Kathmandu, we lost about 1,500 people, somewhere there. Town about 2.5 million people. But it's right now, death count is about 5,000, and it's belong to closer to epicenters actually. And so we're going to be there in the next few days to assess the so-called closer to epicenter.
Yeah, well,
and they have two earthquakes. They have two earthquakes. First one's a Sunday noon, about 7.9, and on the Saturday, Saturday here, and the Sunday, which is 6.5 near Chinese border, which also killed about 1,200 people in smaller towns up in the border. So
yeah, and what I'm understanding, what I've been writing about the last couple of days has been about issues that relate to structures and death counts in the hinterlands. Sorry about that. And it's pretty interesting. Roger Billam was telling me that in my piece what you're that hearing just ran, here, these are very similar that issues. there are so many factors that lead to having very high risk of collapse in some of these areas outside of the city. There's no wood, among other things. These are very similar issues to the ones you're going to see coming out as the rubble is sifted in southeastern Turkey and in Syria across the border. There are these little structural details that can make the difference between a building falling down or standing up.
Or have a less engineering or less quality control. That's usually a tendency. But I'll find out for you and let you know.
Yeah.
But estimated they lost almost somewhere in the 50,000 to 60,000 houses. So that would be a pretty big issue for the reconstruction of the housing stock.
Wow.
And hopefully that the build back better concept will be applied here, which would be, I think.
Yeah.
And but one thing I noticed about Nepal, though, I mean, I think engineers. I thought they're pretty good here, and some of, I mean, obviously I didn't talk to every engineers, but some of the engineers we work with, and just kind of going through their thought process and their attitude about earthquake engineering. I think they got the good basic done, and I mean, this country, from a World Bank to USAID, they have been making quite a bit of investment for the capacity building and risk management and so on. And I can see that there's some certain results come out from that. I really do.
And do you think also in Kathmandu specifically that's the case? I've heard that some people were saying they did get the sense that preparedness really did matter as well, not just sort of that it was weaker.
Well, when I saw the ductile details in a fairly poor construction site, that kind of tells me, well, I mean, ductile details is a sacred thing. It's the so-called last line of defense almost. And I think
can you describe what that means for the non-engineer?
Oh, ductile details essentially the column. Concrete column tend to explode when hit by seismic motion. But what happens is when you provide this this reinforcement tie spacing, almost like or imagine a wine barrel having the steel straps. Imagine those steel straps for things to explode, right? Essentially, the concrete columns act exactly almost the same way. So this steel ties is so important, and the little things make a huge difference.
Right.
And I think the way the engineers told me last 10 years, they have this practice of ductile design. And I think they also have a fairly good redundancy to it. They have a lot of beams and columns, good moment frame systems. And one engineer was telling me they try to eliminate any irregular, conditions and so on. So it's I think it helped.
I remember when I wrote about the school collapses in Sichuan province, the ductile details were the thing. The wrapped pieces have to be bent back, right?
Around
the verticals. And in a lot of cases that wasn't done properly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're going to look into school construction more here, so let's see how it goes. I'll know more about it in the next couple weeks.
Given what you've heard about the numbers of buildings that collapsed out in the countryside and the general outcomes you find in quakes of this sort, do you think there's some credibility to Max Weiss's calculation of
at least a couple, 20. He's in the sort. Well, he said his mid-range thing was 50,000 fatalities, which and Willem said, well, probably a factor of 2 up or down, and so they're saying so 25,000, 50,000 deaths. Does that strike you as sort of beyond the pale or reasonable prospect?
I don't know. Difference this earthquake kind of reminds me a lot of Sichuan earthquake in 2008. In a sense, kind of similar kind of setups and constructions and so on. But Sichuan, we lost about, I think, estimated to be 80,000, 100,000 people, I believe, something like that. Mm-hmm. But that's a much bigger area, though. It's a huge density. Small town had 10 million people in the Sichuan province. That's a totally different scale here. It's like a tenth of the size almost, as far as the population density is concerned. So I'm not so sure about 50,000 people. That seems a big number. Yeah. And I think government estimate about 10,000. I think I got a feeling it's something like that. And USGS forecast, they forecast about 34% probability of 10,000 people in the first day, actually. And that may end up to the number, actually.
Right. I saw their pager analysis. I linked to that in my piece too. The bottom line is the numbers in this particular quake are almost. Well, I'm not saying they don't matter. It's very important, obviously, to the country and the people who died. But one thing that would be a shame would be if they fail to do what you were just talking about, build back better, because this isn't the last earthquake, right?
The horrifying war in Ukraine continues to ravage lives. Millions have endured.
Can you tell me about the overarching vulnerability that still exists in that area?
Oh, yeah. Kathmandu is essentially got lucky, if this earthquake was not 50 miles away, if it is 10 miles away, you're going to see totally different things here. This city is dangerous, just no doubt about it. Yeah. It's just full of the non-ductile concrete and also unreinforced masonry brick construction.
Right.
And many are old. Just the waiting for just actually bigger disaster, and that really concerns me. And it concerns me that Kathmandu's okay. It was not okay, and it just happened to be far distance earthquake. And even some of the aftershocks may actually cause the bigger damage here. So I think that's something we should be really careful about.
Interesting. So, how long are you going to be there?
I don't know. Till our mission's finished.
Wow. Do you have a family life?
I have a family life, but it's something we got to do. There is no organized assessment here started yet, and just public needs it. Public needs to hear the credible engineers to tell them what it's a safe or unsafe, or why safe, why not, why unsafe. They need to know. And so that's what we've been trying to help for both just individual basis to government. The U.S. Embassy asked me to look into many hospitals. So that's what we're doing today and tomorrow.
Yeah, vital services and all that. Is there power?
Yeah, it came back. It just came back yesterday. So it's getting normalized quite a bit now. But yet it's walking through the Kathmandu is pretty eerie sight because all the businesses are closed. There's no one in the street.
Yeah.
Very few people in the street. So it's just a weird feeling, always in a disaster. And a disaster is always such a tragic too. This high-rise building. It's a complex of about 6 buildings, about 20-story buildings. It's a modern construction. It's heavily damaged because of the shaking, and it's most likely not feasible to repair back. And there's a little house next to this, and this lady is sitting right in front of this house. And she looked at me. I was doing a hard head, so she understood I'm an engineer. And she asked me, "Is that safe to go back to my house?" She got a little nice house there. And obviously I had to tell her no, because you got the big building right next to you just cracking up and almost going to fall off you. It's sad, and then she asked me, when can I go back? Well, this owner have to take this building down, or aftershocks have to be released, kind of terminated. And she asked me how long it's going to be. Well, probably a year. It's a hard thing to say to her, but it just tragic. That's a
Yeah.
disaster always like that.
It's really unbelievable. Yeah, I wanted to ask you one quick question about Haiti, where you spent so much time. When I reported on that, I never got to go there. We had other reporters who were on the ground. But a seismologist I talked to said that was another place where they're worried that people might get complacent about the next one, because there is another part of Port-au-Prince that could still be devastated, and the seismological picture looked pretty bad. Is that can you give me a thumbnail of where things stand there?
Well, the reconstruction is almost done. I mean, if you go today, you're going to see very little, say, scar from a 2010 earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, with the USAID, we repaired about 12,000 houses. And after that, actually, commercial sector picked up, and they actually copy our methodologies, which is great, right? And they rebuilt about 120,000 so-called yellow tag houses.
Hey,
I really thought it's really the build back better in a sense, commercially sustainable way. So today, if you walk through the even part of Port-au-Prince, you're going to see ductile details, by the way. You're going to see this 135-degree wood. That's important.
Right.
And so that's definitely changes. And I think commercial sector, private sector, definitely serious about risk management. Today, if they do any kind of commercial buildings, they ask for peer review. They peer review their engineering and supervision of construction. They're very serious. And I think Port-au-Prince people see that seismic risk is a serious thing. And they see that it could be bigger one, could happen again, because that fault line just zipped through right behind them.
Right.
Well, and the last earthquake is almost 10 miles out.
So that was Kit Miyamoto in 2015. A bit of a ritual, reaching out then when he was in Kathmandu after the earthquake that had actually been not so terrible, despite it had a big toll, but it could have been much worse. Kit Miyamoto from Miyamoto Engineering, he's a California Seismic commissioner. He just arrived in Adana, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yep.
And I'm going to take away the Nepal version of you and say
amazing.
greetings. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to join this webcast.
Sure. I guess I got same t-shirt, same hair.
Yeah, I know. So
pretty amazing.
So you're in. Tell us a little bit about Adana.
Sure. So we have an office in Istanbul. So our team has been here for the last couple of days now, and they're inspecting a certain jetty and so on to open up the gas transportation, so the gas can keep coming. Which is a really critical part of the response, obviously. So I'm glad we're able to do that. And basically, I'm in coordinating with the essentially my whole thing's here to assess the needs assessment, what type of needs is required, and what, if any, gaps. I know the government here is a very robust. Okay, they have almost 100,000 staff from this agency. It's kind of like a civil protection agency, similar to FEMA in the U.S. And they're doing participate in a urban search and rescue operation here. And that's what's going on. And Adana, I just arrived, and from airport to this hotel, I didn't see much damage there. I know there's some certain high-rise buildings being destroyed here, and this is fairly far from an epicenter, so I can see that why you don't see that much damage. But if the like high-rise buildings on top of a soft soil, which sounds like the case is, the collapse happen, then those buildings are extremely dangerous. Like a Kathmandu, the epicenter was like several hundred kilometers away, but those tall buildings are damaged because of very soft soil there. So similar things you see here in Adana, obviously.
Right. And I had Susan Huff, a geophysicist from Geological Survey, on talking about earthquake damage, and she said, make sure when you look at the news and you see the buildings that collapsed in the foreground, make sure you look at the ones that didn't fall down.
That's right.
And so I think sometimes people have a feeling that this is just a uniform calamity, but as you have said to me many times, it's buildings. There are many, many, many ways to build a building even with the same batch of material, that's fundamentally more resilient than it might otherwise be.
That's
So,
right. That's right.
talk about that, and maybe we'll mention ductile detail, but what's your sense of Turkey's general status now compared to, let's say, 10 years ago? I did a long article for the New York Times in 2009 about the vulnerability of so many buildings that are called rubble in waiting. I can't remember if you used that phrase too. So what's your sense of what we're looking at now as opposed to maybe 10 years ago?
Well, I mean, we've been active, personally, I've been active here since like about 2006 or so. And our first program was the seismic strengthening of 2,000 schools and hospitals and all public buildings in Istanbul. And that was right after the 1999 earthquake. So public, government was very, very serious about the seismic risk in Istanbul. So I mean, this country has been preparing for this type of earthquake for the last 20 years, and it's definitely, that's why you can see that very robust response from government. 100,000, public employees out there is a huge number. But again, it's a huge, big area too, though. So it's going to take some time for those guys. But as far as the earthquake code is concerned, late 90s, they changed the building code to address a seismic issue. And one thing I noticed that throughout this 2000 seismic strengthening programs in Istanbul, contractor, they didn't know exactly what's important and what was not, right?
Right.
But they also know that seismic risks are huge. So essentially, the ones going through the whole kind of a capacity building of contractors and through these projects we're working on, they start to realize how important little thing, such as a hoop, concrete columns, little hook. Previously they didn't know that was how easy to make this thing and how important the little hooks are. So once started working with them, they really got it. And I think that program impact a lot for the construction quality in the Istanbul area. So I felt really good about that because I remember that because it was such a huge project and also so impacted many contractors. So that was good. Now, obviously, this is pretty far from Istanbul.
Right.
Okay. And so it's a different kind of things going on here. But our team basically report back that much of collapsed buildings you see in the older stock, like a built somewhere before 2000. They see a lot of it. But they also saw the new construction collapse too. And they see that they estimate about maybe 10% of buildings which have been collapsing is fairly new construction.
Yeah.
So, obviously quality control is it's the most important part, right? I mean, these engineers here, Turkish engineers are good engineers, and the building code is good code, but it's all coming down to how it's going to be implemented in the field, obviously.
Yeah, I saw so many examples there where it's the informal construction that not every in cities it's a little different than maybe in more rural areas, small towns, but there's still a lot of informal construction or a floor added on top of another floor, and also there's inertia, right? We mostly live in buildings that were built decades ago. Wherever we are, and so you're kind of, it feels like the retrofitting part is particularly hard. I know I wrote at that time, 2009, about World Bank funding for schools and hospitals, but it always feels like there's so much more to do.
Oh yeah, I mean that retrofit is extremely difficult. Even the cost structure is something that our experience tells us between 5% or low as a few percentage to maybe 10-15% of a replacement cost, the total cost of a building per se, right? So it seems very small amount to do that, but even a small amount to spend the money in peacetime per se is a very difficult thing to do. For public buildings, has to have a certain public support, sentiment to doing it, right? So ISMAT program, which I was describing, has a public support there. Like in California, SB 1953, that policy essentially the required all the hospitals to be seismically upgraded, but essentially deadlines keep pushing it because even investment could be small amount, but it's just that there is no say money to make per se, right? Let's say I think that's a problem is because if you do seismic strengthening, you do that, it does not add values to the market value to the building, because that's how kind of like if you paint a new put some new architectural stuff, it will increase the asset value, right? Wow, nice, nice building now, so it become more expensive potentially, but not seismic strengthening. So that's that. I think that's why it's so difficult about this whole concept here, but that's why the always seismic strengthening program like that happens after the major earthquake.
Right.
What I mean?
Yeah,
like SB 1953 in California is inspired after the North Ridge,
in California, I think we're coming up on the is it the centennial? No, 1933 was the Long Beach quake.
Yeah.
Which really jogged. 70 schools fell down, but it was after school, so it was kind of a miraculous wake-up
That's
call.
right.
That's led to a lot of a lot more attention to that stuff in California.
That's right. That particular earthquake triggered to build the agent school, DSA. That's the statewide school safety or quality control components of a agency essentially building, which they're doing a fantastic job for past 100 years.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I know you have to get off in a few minutes. Do you have a couple more minutes? I want to
Sure. Yeah, no problems.
So where are you? So you're heading next? Where are you most focused?
Well, essentially I'm going to be probably focused on the. Essentially, what our mission here to have a needs assessment, right? What need to be done? What's the gaps here? And understand how the government are working. And we basically coordinated with the World Bank and the United Nations to see that what type of things internationally need to be done. Because right now is the rescue components going on, right? This is going to last for next maybe week or so, maybe two. It's going to slow down after probably a couple weeks from now. Then the phase is how to get back to normal as soon as possible.
Right.
So basically assessments of schools. Unfortunately, the earthquake was early morning, so there was no students was in there. But those schools were safely reoccupied, hospitals, and bridges. So so-called key components of it. And my team report back some of the towns. You're talking about 25%, 40% of buildings have collapsed. So how going to manage the debris? Those are a big deal. So I think usually debris become the kind of roadblock of a recovery. So we're going to be start looking at components of it. But,
was it you? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I can't remember if it was you who was warning me after the Haiti quake, the 2010 one, I think, not the more recent one, that there was a tendency people would start to rebuild on the rubble, like you can end up with vulnerability.
Yeah.
As people settle in areas that are no longer stable ground.
Yeah.
Is that a concern in thinking about where this goes from here?
I think here it's probably, that kind of thing is probably not going to be happening. As I said, the government is pretty strong here, and Civil Protection Agency is very strong, so they are going to be pretty robust about where and how things get built back. That's my sense, and but I'll find out more for the next few days here.
Yeah, and I'm just going to show one more example of this issue of looking at places that didn't fall down. So here's an example of obviously utter destruction, but what would you say about that? What we're looking at in the background? Actually, that might not be a completed building, but the
probably not. But
interesting.
Andy, over the years, I really came to the conclusion is what collapsed and what doesn't collapse is a lot to do with newer construction tend to do better than the older one. Generally speaking, by the way, not all the time that's the case, but what to do with the frequency content of the ground motion, is that moving fast or slow? Mm-hmm. And if the buildings are tall or small and how it's moving, if the ground's moving slow, just like a soft soil, like Kathmandu Earth, event in 2015, is slow motion in Kathmandu, even epicenter is far away. So taller buildings, it sways much more. So that's gonna affect a lot more. So Kathmandu, those brand new 20-story concrete structures get damaged quite a bit, but not for unreinforced masonry bricks and little tiny ones. It hasn't even felt that thing. You know what I mean? Mexico
Yeah.
City, 2017. Most of the damage you see in around 3-story kind of buildings, kind of stuff going on. 1986, a 6-story. So it just depends on, you know what I mean? So it's a lot to do with the frequency content of a motion and the building itself. But of course, if you design per current code right now, they do really well to absorb the energy to basically reduce the risk of the collapse per se. But still, new construction expectation is, if you design per new building code, expectation is that you're going to see that a few percentage, you're going to see some certain partial collapse of that kind of structure like that. I think that's the kind of in a way, Andy, that myth of a code, right? People think, okay, it's a myth code, so therefore the earthquake proof. That's how they look at them. But as you can see, nature is much more random, more like a bell curve, right? Some do perform much better than what it says, some perform much worse, some average value there,
Yeah.
So that's how it works like that. And the soil's condition makes a huge differences. So you're going to see the pocket about the collapsal failures, a lot to do with the soil conditions. Softer soil, usually damage much higher than the hard one.
Now, presumably, that's something that could be factored into how you rebuild, looking at the particular conditions in different parts of a city, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right.
Well, I'd love it if we can revisit with you when you have some time in the middle of everything that's going to be unfolding. And I'm really glad that people with your level of expertise are willing to, deploy to catastrophes like this, so that the natural hazard doesn't always lead to a truly monumental disaster. I think that people can start to distinguish between a natural hazard and an unnatural disaster, which is a function of what we do or don't do in harm's way.
That's right. That's right. And Andy, even building code may be completely different from, say, before 2000 today. New stock for buildings, small percentage compared to the existing buildings, right? That's why you see such a huge, this is a kind of disaster you see there. So that's why the seismic strengthening actually is only one solution if you think about it,
Right. It's, and how do you, one last question, knowing what you know about buildings and vulnerability and the map of the world, how do you wake up in the morning, with energy, and you have an enthusiasm and a devotion to this that doesn't seem to get worn down? How does that work?
With me? Well, I don't know. I'm kind of I've been doing this for quite a long time now, past 15 years pretty much in disaster zone, and from Haiti to Nepal to Afghanistan. Now we got the operation going on in Ukraine. It's a war, it's not earthquake, but similar kind of things going on out there.
Yeah.
And now here, and I think that because we've been in so many of the disasters and in a part of not only just response but recovery, reconstruction phase. Because once we're there, we stay for years. We're a business, so therefore we can stay forever, right? We just stay, and we become a localized companies. So essentially, they become localized, and we learn so many lessons from so many different places, from Haiti to New Zealand to just name it. So to us, is to be able to share that type of success and failures, what we see in the past, from different societies, different countries, communities, and apply that to this, unfortunate places. Hopefully the recovery process gets shorter. That's drive us. That's drive me.
Yeah, one of my, as a communicator, what I keep trying to focus on is, can does each place have to always suffer its own calamity to understand some of these issues, or can there be more transference of knowledge and capacity?
Yeah. It's I think recovery process of the disaster is something new. There's actually a whole study for this thing, whole research for these things, and but it's a fairly new arena for what triggers that recovery faster or slower or never happens or go even better. There's ways to go. There's little things makes a difference. Some policies, some zonings, how to make the private sector invest quicker, stuff like that, just makes a big difference.
Yeah, well, that's again, smoothing these processes, normalizing some of the paths forward. It's great that you're doing this. Miyamoto International is an organization that, again, your focus on not just being a business, but on really making a difference feels to me.
Yeah, I
we need
mean,
more of that in this century.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for us, is that our purpose and mission, and what I just said is the most critical to make this safer. That's what we want to do, and if there's the right strategies, and it should have a after the fact, money should follow type of approach. And if it doesn't, it's not what we do. For otherwise, there's no way we can do it. You know what I mean?
Well, I again appreciate your time. I want to show one last. This is a clip that I don't think I ever shared with you from when I was in Istanbul, walking around with Evan Kantekin, who was an engineer working on a community disaster preparedness program. But we were talking about soft floors. It's just one little element of building.
I will say one of the first that may go down.
What are the features that give you that confidence?
Well, the structural elements. Look at the columns.
They don't look very robust.
No, not only that. It's also you have a huge mass up there, and then this is what we call soft floor. Okay, this shouldn't happen.
So that's the kind of reality, as you said, the lock-in of older buildings, the fact that we're living in cities that were built in the last 60 years. Istanbul went from 1 million to 10 million people or more just in a couple of generations. And we don't all live in a shiny, new reality. So thanks again, Kit Miyamoto, for jumping in from Adana, Turkey. Good luck with your work, you and your company and your companions there. It's great that you do what you do, and have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you. This is Andy Revkin from Columbia Climate School, Sustain What webcast. Kit Miyamoto in Adana, Turkey, whose company he runs around the world, basically, to earthquake zones, and to really make sure there's a build forward. I would say build forward better.
Yeah.
More than build back.
Like that. That's right. That's right. That's exactly what it should be.
Yeah, it doesn't always. You're not building back to an old standard. You're trying to build to a new standard. Thanks again. And
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye. Well, this show turned out very differently than what we had initially anticipated. Again, Kit Miyamoto's company works in war zones like Ukraine as well as in earthquake zones. I'll be writing up some aspects of this for the Sustain What blog that I do, and thank you for those who tuned in despite the sort of complexity of the day. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. Spread safety. Look for those who are more vulnerable among your community, whether the risk is earthquake, heat, storm, or pestilence, and see what you can do to make things a little bit better. Take care.